Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
This week, a preview of the coming 2020 session. We talk with Governor Tim Walz, Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka, and House Majority Leader Ryan Winkler about the priorities for this legislative session. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Lurkey. Earlier this week, I sat down with Governor Tim Walz to talk about the coming legislative session. Here is part one of our conversation. You campaigned with a One Minnesota slogan, pledging to listen to diverse views and bring people together. I've heard grumbling from people of a different political persuasion that you are not, as governor, being as inclusive with diverse views in cabinet appointments and advisory councils. How do you respond?
Well, I think you're probably always going to have that. People tend to think if they don't get their person on there that you're not listening. I think in terms of bringing folks together in what I think is arguably probably the most divided we've ever seen our nation, and what's, the backdrop of what's happening in D.C., we came together with the only divided legislature, got a budget together, had tough issues that were lingering for years, like the provider tax, MNLARS, some of those types of things. Not only got that done, got it done without issuing a veto. And I view that as a veto as the ultimate decision where you couldn't come together. So as far as appointments and things like that, I think it's very clear if you're talking about diversity of inclusion, we have never seen more women in terms of cabinet, commissioners, and we've not seen people of color. My appointments to the judicial, to the bench, have been the most diverse ever. And I think a wide spectrum of folks from the biofuels conference. I mean, I think you're putting the corn growers and Farm Bureau along with Land Stewardship Project. That's a pretty big spectrum of folks across an industry. So I think in terms of where we're at right now, I think it's pretty arguable that that we have done probably as good a job as you could in this environment of bringing folks across party lines, across ideas, across differences together. And I think the usual complaints that, it's not my way, so it must be wrong.
Over the weekend, there was a shakeup with the Senate DFL leadership, and Susan Kent of Woodbury will be the new minority leader. Tom Bach will step down. What are your thoughts on this leadership change?
Well, the one thing is that the legislative branch is co-equal and independent. They make their decisions. I certainly want to congratulate Senator Kent and the caucus over there, and also to thank Senator Bach. We worked together. He was part of this negotiating team that did what we just spoke about bringing people together. And I think the Senate will make the choice that they think is best. I think you're always going to do shifts in power structures that move around, and my goal, though, and my responsibility is I have to work with the entire legislative branch. That means working with Majority Leader Gazelka, Minority Leader Kent, and then I've got it in the House with Speaker Hortman and Leader Doubt. And so it'll be a little different dynamic, but I certainly am ready to work with them, ready to make sure we do good for Minnesota.
We're in the midst of the longest economic expansion in history, and yet the markets are getting skittish with the coronavirus. Baby boomers are retiring en masse. The labor market is tightening. Every seat in the legislature will be on the ballot this fall, except for yours.
That's right.
What would you like to see the legislature accomplish this session?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think one thing is Minnesotans tend to be thoughtful about the future. I think I tend to be pretty conservative in terms of rainy day funds. And it won't matter who's the president. It's not a debate about that. It's just markets have natural fluctuations, and I think there will be a correction at some point. That's why I think right now we're at a really unique moment. We have one of the strongest fiscal positions of any state in the nation. We have record reserves, and we'll be able to finish that up, knowing that when that downturn comes, then we don't have to cut snowplow drivers. We don't have to cut water treatment plant workers, whatever that may be. And so I think now we take advantage of having AAA bond rating. We are at a point, too, as you talk about this largest expansion, we are at historically low interest rates, just slightly over 1%. We have a backlog of needs that have been kicked down the road, from transportation to projects in communities. That's why my local jobs and project, the bonding bill, I did it differently. Over this last year, I was at over 600 public events, hundreds of communities, getting out there, listening to folks, vetting these online, getting input from them, and then putting out what I think is a bold proposal to use the opportunity now to prepare for the future, because it's going to get more expensive to fix these roads and bridges. It's going to get more expensive to invest in housing. We know that these are needs out there. Now's the time to do it. So I really have to be honest. I think we stay in our lane and take care of that. I think we take some of these things off the table, like emergency insulin and a few of those, and then we debate our philosophical differences. That's healthy going into an election. I think we should do something on red flag laws, on guns. That's going to be a very passionate debate, and that's okay. I'm not real hopeful that it'll pass the Senate, but it will at least set up a contrast so the voters will know come November. And that's not cynical, that's just the way the system's supposed to work. So I think what you'll see is us, again, coming together, finding a spot where we can do some serious investments at the cheapest interest rates we've ever seen, tackle a couple of bipartisan issues perhaps, and I'm hopeful. I'm going to meet, later this week with GOP. I'm meeting with all their leadership about what their plans are, and I'm pretty hopeful that a clean energy plan was submitted. And this is the first time that I can remember them talking about the need to address carbon emissions. And so maybe there's some possibilities there.
It was one of the questions that I had for later. It appears energy will be a hot topic this session because the Senate Republicans are talking about their clean energy first proposal. The Senate and House DFL both have climate caucuses. You've established a climate change sub-cabinet and an advisory council. Is there a groundswell growing around this issue?
I do believe that, and I never want to. If you're coming to the party, I don't care if you're late. I'm hearing GOP senators talk about climate in a real, and not trying to deflect, saying we need to address it. I think their rhetoric is a little more of that we need to have a bridge to get there, but that's healthy. I'm okay with that. And as I meet with them, I'm going to encourage them that we're not in total agreement, but I think we should try and get what we can. So yes, I think the necessity of this, I have been saying this for a while, but I think we're just a few years away from that. It's pretty well established that we need to address climate change, we need to reduce carbon emissions, and we need to do it in a way that's not disruptive to our economy or to people's lives, meaning we have to have dependable, affordable, reliable energy, and we should move as quickly as we can to get there. I applaud Xcel Energy, made a bold move, and they were with me on the 2050 plan. So I do think this is room to talk about, and I think folks in the legislatures know that this is on the public's mind. I met with a large business group, and they, no surprise, taxes tends to be on their mind, but that was I believe, third. Second was climate change. First, of course, with healthcare, and drug pricing. So I think that's a healthy discussion, and I think there's maybe some room for common ground there.
The achievement gap remains problematic in Minnesota, and recently the Fed President Neil Kashkari and former Supreme Court Justice Alan Page proposed a constitutional amendment that would guarantee a quality education for every Minnesotan. Is this a good direction to move?
I've always viewed it as a fundamental right as a teacher. I welcome this conversation. These are things that we've strived for going clear back to Brown versus Board of Education. We have laws in place that should be doing this. I think bringing this up with an understanding that we need to do better. I dig into these numbers all the time. I know, for example, that our Native American dropout rate was 261 students. So when we're talking about percentage in this, the entire population is about 1,600 students. When we drop out 261 out of those, the graduation rate goes way down. We have to do better on that. So I think this conversation is a healthy one. I think it starts us at a good point. I'd also like to note, though, of our 1,400 students that didn't graduate that pulled down this gap, they were homeless or had home insecurity. Half of them still graduated, which speaks volumes about themselves, and their schools that they're in. But I think we need to approach this holistically. This is why we're going to have this conversation, and I welcome it. And if the decision is to go in that direction, that's fine. But just to be clear, just like Brown versus Board of Education was enshrined into law, it did not change the situation by itself. You had housing issues, you had equity of income issues. Those are things that I think this proposal kind of springboards to a broader conversation, and it will be my absolute responsibility to help us continue to close that. And we'll start to see graduation rates creep up. We see the gap closing slightly. That's small consolation to parents who are saying, what about my child right now? And I think for all of us, it's in all of our best interest, both morally and economically, because that workforce you talked about being so tight, we can't afford to lose any of these students. We need them in the workforce. We need them to be entrepreneurs. We need them to be teachers, doctors, construction. Those are all things that play into that. So this is a healthy conversation. I'm glad it's out there, and I think maybe it will be the catalyst for more.
A few weeks ago, I spoke with Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka about his caucus's goals for this session. I began by asking if Minnesotans should expect tax relief.
Yes, they should. The last 3 years, some of our policies, the Senate Republicans have, I think, worked, and so now we have a surplus. We fully funded our budget last year, education, HHS, et cetera. Everything was fully funded. Our reserves are right up at the top. They've never, we hit the ceiling. We have as much as we need there. What do you do with the rest? Some people want to spend it. I say we should give it back. So a couple of things that we're looking at. One is fully exempting Social Security income. That's something that Minnesota is one of a few states that does that. Maybe we could just get rid of that one. Another one is for farmers. It's called Section 179. It's when they purchase farm equipment. We want that to line up with the federal government and their tax law. That would save them some taxes as well. So those are a couple ideas. There's other things we're talking about, but those are two.
Let's turn to bonding, because this will be a bonding year, and that's also top of mind. Governor Walz has put together a package of proposals that would spend about $2 billion. You've indicated a willingness to go about half that far. What bonding projects will be priorities? What kinds of projects will be priorities for your caucus in the coming session?
Yeah, so first of all, it's important that people know that I'm saying we should have a bonding bill. There's many of negotiations where one side says we're not going to do any bonding bill. And so we're publicly saying we think it's good for Minnesota to do a bonding bill. Our forecast says that without having to pay any more interest above what we normally predicted, it would be $755 million. So that's kind of the bottom number. Our last two bonding bills have both been under $1 billion, but right around that number. And so that's the first thing, is what is the final number going to be? But we're openly talking about, let's all figure out how to do a bonding bill. And then what we want to focus on is wastewater infrastructure will be a big one. Higher education, their buildings need upkeep. Things, roads and bridges, those are the key things that we want to do. Focus on the main things that everybody benefits from. Then the size of the bonding bill isn't as important as what we focus on.
So focusing on wastewater, higher education, roads and bridges.
Yeah, those would be
those three areas.
Yeah.
Okay, your caucus has been very active in looking for ways to lower the cost of health care. And that issue is something voters care deeply about. What are some goals in the coming session to tackle both access and cost of health care?
So first of all, cost. We have been making great progress in the last 3 years. We did something called reinsurance, which stabilized the market, brought more competition in, and right now Minnesota's rates are cheaper than anywhere else in the country. So it's really good news, but that doesn't mean your work is done. You should keep working towards that. So one of the things that we're going to work on is drug reimportation. Why can't you go to your pharmacy and get prescription drug costs like what you do in Canada? So that's the big one that we're rolling out right now. There'll be other things as well, but that's the one that comes top of mind.
Okay. There will be a supplemental budget also this session. And are there any areas specifically where state spending should increase, whether it be education or veterans or farmers or childcare? Where should maybe some of these excess dollars go? Where is there still need?
First of all, we're not saying that there will be a supplemental budget. We'll have to have a conversation about that. Most of that $1 billion plus surplus is what we call one-time money. It's there now, but it won't be there 4 years from now. And so we'll have to look at that very prudently. One of the one-time dollars that I'm open to is if we haven't fully taken care of safe schools, making sure their buildings are safe, that would be one of the things that for one-time money I might be open to, but we're not automatically saying just because we have a surplus means we want to spend more money. We're talking about giving it back to the taxpayer.
Now, I did read in the press release, though, that tackling the disparity gap in Minnesota would be something that you would look at. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, last year we brought up the fact that we thought we should do opportunity scholarships, provide more ways for the disadvantaged to find more directions they can go to get a good education. Our disparity in Minnesota, racial disparity for education, is lower than anywhere else in the country. So the disparity is great in Minnesota between white and, say, black, but you take that same black population in other urban areas around the country, and we're not doing well against them either. And so I say it's the definition of insanity. If you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. We have to be willing to try things like the Opportunity Scholarship. There's a program called ACE in Texas where they pay teachers more to be in front of students in very difficult districts. So we have to explore things that are different than what we've been doing, and I'll continue to advocate for that.
There has been a spike in violent crime in Minneapolis and St. Paul of late. Addressing the uptick in violence is a priority for your caucus. What types of proposals would be included in lowering the incidence of violent crime, especially in Minneapolis, St. Paul?
So we know it's a complex problem, but it is rising, and so we just say it's unacceptable. One of the things that we're going to do, in fact, we're doing a hearing on this up in Hibbing within the next week on public safety issues, and one of them is being tougher on felons that have a gun. They're not supposed to have a gun. If they've got a gun and they're a felon, the odds of them committing a crime are going to go way up, and so we want to be. That's an area that we want to explore to actually be much tougher in that area on sentencing.
Okay. Anything else at this point on that topic?
No, not at this point.
Not at this point. Okay. Recently, both the Energy Chair, David Osmek, was on the program, and the bill's author, Senator David Senjum, talking about clean energy first. What are the benefits for the state by setting up a preference for clean energy over the traditional ways that we have powered this state?
So there's been a lot of conversation about 100% renewable by 2050 or whatever, and I've always said that's not the way we should be going. Last year we had the polar vortex in February. Our 30% renewable energy could only produce 5% of the energy we needed. So if you just have renewable, that's a problem. And so we're saying let's focus on clean energy that's affordable and reliable. So it includes renewable energy, but it also includes the new technology, nuclear. It includes clean coal out from North Dakota. They're being able to capture all of the CO2. I mean, we have different technology today. We should be using the resources that come from water. I mean, we should look everywhere. If the goal is about reducing the carbon footprint, it doesn't have to just be renewable. So we're going to emphasize all of the above. Let's use technology today and move in that direction.
And finally, before we go, there have been lots of problems with the Department of Human Services, lots of headlines, overpayments to tribes and counties. The legislative auditor issued a report recently pointing to, quote, troubling dysfunction. Your caucus has said that you're looking at oversight and accountability measures. What does that entail?
Well, first of all, it's an area I hope that the governor leans in with us. We did work together to fix MNLARS, our license and registration services. That was an area that we had talked about for probably 6 years. This governor agreed to have an independent third party look at it, and we ended up going the direction that we talked about. I think DHS, Department of Health and Human Services, is even worse. It's many problems, and one of the things that we are exploring is how do we divide it up so that there's better oversight of some of these areas. I mean, there's so many areas for decades that have been a problem. So we're asking the governor to lean in with us. We will put forward proposals for this session, and I'm hoping we can get them done.
Senate Majority Leader Paul Gazelka, thank you.
It's good to be here again.
Now joining me to preview the caucus goals for the House DFL is House Majority Leader Ryan Winkler. Thanks for taking the time today.
Sure, happy to be here.
So let's start with bonding. This will be a bonding year. I've read that the House DFL position is to have the largest responsible bonding package without losing the state's AAA rating. So most likely that number will be tempered by the Senate Republicans, who have been talking about $1 billion. But what's essential in bonding and how high might it go?
We have infrastructure needs throughout Minnesota, and the needs are getting worse as time goes on, as we have been limiting the amount of capital investment that we're doing. So we have clean water infrastructure in greater Minnesota communities that is falling apart and is something that those local communities can't pay for on their own. They need state support. We have higher education facilities at Minnesota State and the University of Minnesota all over that require upgrades and require maintenance, and we are letting those buildings fall apart. We have transportation needs at the local level, roads and bridges that require state assistance to be able to fund. And we have all sorts of community-based economic development and community building projects that are really important for local regions to be successful. So we have significant needs around the state on a lot of important issues. And we need a robust bonding bill in order to create local jobs, in order to fund those projects at the state and local level that are essential for our economic growth now and for years to come.
And as high as we can responsibly go will be your number.
Well, we know that we can go significantly above the $1 billion mark that we've seen in the past, and we also know that as long as we are held to that artificially determined number, the needs of infrastructure are getting greater, and our ability to pay is falling behind because construction costs are rising so quickly. So we need to get a handle on our infrastructure needs around the state, and sitting at $1 billion year after year just isn't doing the job.
You recently completed a statewide tour of town hall meetings where you talked with Minnesotans about the legalization of recreational marijuana for adult use. It has become a priority for your caucus. Why is that?
The biggest reason is that the current cannabis laws that we have are failing. We have a criminal justice approach to cannabis where we are arresting people, prosecuting them, throwing them in jail, and doing so in a way that is very disproportionate based on race. So we are locking up people of color in order to try to regulate a marketplace for cannabis, and it's failing in every respect and creating a lot of harm. Veterans who have PTSD or long-term pain can't afford our current medical program. There's no alternative for them, despite the fact that cannabis would help significantly in getting them off of opioids, which are far more dangerous. And we have a number of reasons why people should be able to access cannabis for personal use if they are adults and can make their own decisions. So there's a personal freedom, there's a health component, there's a veterans component, and there's a racial justice component to why we need to change the way we're doing this.
Another issue that's been percolating for some time in the legislature is a bill to address access to insulin and making it affordable or free even in emergency situations. It seems that negotiations with the Senate have reached an impasse, but also related to the cost of insulin is the cost of prescription drugs, and that is something that your caucus mentioned is an important addressing that high cost. So what will you do to tackle the high cost of prescription drugs?
Well, we have a number of things that we're working on. The insulin issue is really a highlight for us because it demonstrates exactly what is wrong with our prescription drug system. We have insulin, which has been basically the same for decades. Companies have jacked up the prices 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times what it used to be, even though they haven't invested anything new in it, and people depend on it on a daily basis for their lives. We've had 2 Minnesotans in the last year who've lost their lives because they were rationing insulin. And the fact of the matter is that we have an industry in the pharmaceutical industry that has the arrogance to think that they don't have to come to the table and be part of the solution. They believe that they are not subject to the ordinary rules of the road that every other industry is part of. They've got so many lobbyists, they spend so much money, they think that they are untouchable. And what this insulin debate is about, in part, is making sure that that industry comes to the table and is part of the solution and puts some money on the line to do that. It's an important principle, and it's vital for people who have diabetes, including my own son. And so that's kind of a titanic struggle against an industry that has had a free rein for too long on their own ability to raise prices and deprive people of things that are vital to their health. We think that they should come to the table. We think that they can. We've been introducing legislation related to price transparency and pharmaceutical benefit managers because we think that an open, clear, sunlit marketplace is much better functioning than one where rebates and incentives are moving around and nobody knows what's happening. So there's so much that needs to happen to make pharmaceuticals available and affordable to people, but the insulin fight is in part about whether we can bring an industry to the table and force them to deal with us.
The last economic forecast showed the state had a surplus of over $1 billion and full rainy day funds. Assuming the next forecast, which will be the end of this month, confirms that surplus, what would your caucus like to see done with those additional dollars?
Well, it's important to remember that the so-called surplus is really a projection based on economic growth. And the extra money that we have is really the difference between a 1.6% growth for a year and 1.5%. So we're dealing with very tiny changes in estimates that make it appear like we will have future money. If we end up having money available, obviously we should be careful about long-term commitments, either tax cuts or spending. But there are certain places we can put that money where investing it now will make a big difference. One of those areas is in early childhood education, where we can get kids right now access to high-quality early learning and can make the child care crisis a little bit less than it is around the state by putting some money in towards programs we already have but have been underfunded. So that's one place we can put one-time money that can make a difference now. Another is in our capital investment bill area. There are a number of projects where cash can help get projects completed or get done more quickly or started more quickly. So that's another place we can look at one-time money. But the bottom line is, over time, Minnesota does not have extra money coming in. We have needs in health and human services and in education that are significantly higher than what we're currently allocating. And so we have to be very careful and honest about the choices we face.
Minnesota's achievement gap continues to plague policyholders. What policy proposals will you have to continue to address that disparity?
Yeah, the House DFL is bringing forward a $500 million one-time proposal to put $190 million into early childhood scholarships, which has had a long history of bipartisan support for kids 0 to 3. That is the best place to invest money. Almost any budget area on any topic is the youngest kids and getting them a great start in life. We will put another $190 million towards the Child Care Assistance Program, which helps low-income families get access to child care so that they can work and continue to build and grow out of poverty. And then we will provide grants and loans to child care providers around the state, especially in greater Minnesota, to help make sure that child care is actually available for people. Now, that's one part of the achievement gap, is investing early. We also have to reform our education system in general to make it reflect the students who are coming through today, and whether that's through having more teachers of color, whether it's more cultural competency in the school system so that people understand the different backgrounds kids are coming from. We have so many more kids coming in with emotional and psychological challenges, and our schools aren't set up for that. So there's a whole range of things that we need to do to address the achievement gap. And I think that this session we can make some progress.
I know your caucus has also talked about gun violence prevention, and there will be more on that, I'm sure. For now, we have to end, so I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Lurkey, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.